Hi there, could you do me a favour really quick? Would you pretty please subscribe to the show, leave me a 5-star rating if you like it, and share an episode or two with your bookish friends? Better yet, if you could drop a link to the show or to your favourite episode in your book club or bookish group chat, that works too. I promise it only takes a few seconds, it really helps the show, plus I'll be incredibly grateful for it. So thanks in advance, and now on to the episode. Hello, I'm Victoria from Biblio Lifestyle, and you're listening to the Reader's Couch podcast, the show that will help you bridge the gap between living a full and busy life to one where you're reading, learning new things, and having fun. Today on the couch, I'm so excited to welcome author Cathy Yandell to talk about her new book, The French Art of Living Well, Finding Joie de Vivre in the Everyday World. The French Art of Living Well takes a look at French culture from literature to cuisine to humor and more, and showing how the French have captured that magic known as Joie de Vivre and their unique approach to enjoying life. Now, in this episode, Cathy and I talk about so many things, from the differences in American and French culture to her experiences attending a French wedding and the atmosphere in Paris during the 2018 World Cup. Plus, Cathy also shares her recommendations of places to visit, things to do, shopping tips, plus lots more. So, let's get into the episode because I can't wait for you to listen to my chat with author Cathy Yandell. So, I have a quick question to ask you. Have you ever thought about starting a reading habit? Or maybe you're a once-in-every-blue-moon type of reader, but you want to be more consistent and maintain a reading habit. Or maybe you're an avid reader, but you're interested in having a more intentional and fulfilling reading life. Does that sound like you? If any of those scenarios sound like you in even the slightest, I want to invite you to take the What's Your Reader Type quiz. It will only take 60 seconds of your time and you'll discover your reader type. But most importantly, you'll get the resources you need to start reading, maintain the habit, and get intentional. So visit readertypequiz.com. That's readertypequiz.com. It will only take you 60 seconds and you'll discover your reader type and get the resources you need. So whether you're an aspiring or avid reader, go to readertypequiz.com, spend 60 seconds and take the quiz that will help you get clear on where you are right now and what you need to do to live your best reading and literary life yet. Hi readers, welcome again to the Reader's Couch. I'm your host, Victoria Wood. And here on the couch with me is a professor that teaches courses in French Renaissance literature and culture, contemporary cultural and political issues in France, and the French language. But she's here on the couch with me to talk about her new book, The French Art of Living Well. Please welcome to the couch, Cathy Yandell. Hi, Cathy.
Hello, Victoria.
Welcome. So happy to have you here. So your new book, The French Art of Living Well, will be available for readers. I mean, how are you feeling? How excited are you?
Oh, it's very exciting. This is my first book without footnotes.
Well, first non-academic book. I'm really excited it's here. But I want readers to hear straight from you. Tell us about your new book, The French Art of Living Well, and what can readers expect when they pick up a copy?
It's really a lot about my discovery of things French and about how I really do think they have a certain joie de vivre as a culture. And so what I wondered was, what about this notion of joie de vivre, right? So why is it a fundamentally French concept? It must be French because we can't seem to come up with a better term for it in English. And so I wanted to explore different areas that have to do with joie de vivre. Like some of the chapters talk about things like taking time, making time, or celebrating the senses. So I wanted to sort of deep dive into what what makes the French culture tick in such a way that it's known for its joy of living.
Absolutely. And to your point, you've divided the book in roughly about 6 main core chapters. The first one is Celebrating the Senses, Chapter 2, Shaking It Up, 3, Sparkling the Mind, 4, Finding Art Everywhere, 5, Defining Frenchness, and 6, Taking Time, Making Time. I like these 6 divisions, but I'm really curious, how did you come up with these 6 key points to kind of, discuss and dive into the French culture that way?
The reason that's a great question is that I had to restructure it because my first idea was just telling about how I went to France and then telling all these different cultural things. And I couldn't sort of figure out how to weave those together. But it struck me that I was actually talking about several different issues, like the senses, for example. So then I went back and sort of reconstructed things that happened to me and things that I was involved in and my French family and so on, and saw how that fit into the notion, say, of celebrating the senses. So I reorganized the whole thing from when I first started writing it.
Oh, amazing. That's quite interesting to hear. So the Celebrating the Senses really caught my attention, which is the first chapter. Just really briefly, you mentioned that you went to a French wedding. It was your first one. You had no idea what you were in for. Of course, food is a big part of French culture. But what I gathered from reading is the one thing that was evident, I guess you could say, is the fact that folks spend a lot of time conversing with each other and engaging in real conversation. What would you say is the difference between French culture versus American culture in this regard?
Well, one of the issues is temporal because at least in Minnesota, people tend to eat pretty early by our standards, in my family anyway. And there are kids who eat, for example, with their families at 5:00 and would come by to play with my children, but they hadn't even had dinner till 7. Well, in France, you're not going to have dinner until at least 8, for example. And that's partly because that's often how you spend the evening. It's not that you just eat and eat, but you spend a lot of time at the table. And I was talking to a friend recently who said, it's just amazing. You can run into a friend in France. I mean, if you live in Paris, that doesn't happen that often, but you can say, hey, let's go have a coffee. Or, by the way, are you busy for dinner? And you take that time to talk and just exchange while you're eating. So eating becomes the sort of backdrop to the human experience, I think.
Right, absolutely. Chapter 2, Shaking It Up. I loved it because it was around the time of, what was it? I should have made a note. 1998, I think it was, or 2018. No, it was 2018. The soccer tournament, World
Yes.
Cup Championships. Yes. So that would be 2018. Now I remember. Yep. You were recalling just your experience there and just the fever and the fact that it's not just a game, it's a way of life. So tell me about your experience with the World Cup, being there, and just your experiences with folks watching and coming together.
Right. And I thought this was very different from sports in the United States, too, because certainly there are people with sports teams. And even when the U.S. is competing, say, in the Olympics, certainly there are certain people who are interested in it. But what happens in France with football, or soccer, as we call it here, is that once it becomes a national, it's practically like a national holiday. So even people who don't necessarily follow soccer normally come out of the woodwork. And that day we got up early to go walking around to see where we were going to land, because it's so much fun to watch the games with other people. And they open cafes and have these big screens, and it just seems like the whole world is there together. And we met some young women from southern France, and they were clinking Stella Artois, and we were having our little glass of French red wine, and everybody was absolutely together. And afterwards we got on the metro, and I'd never had that experience before, where there were so many people crammed into the metro, and we were all singing "On a gagné," we won, and the whole metro car just started careening. And I loved looking around and seeing people dressed in African garb and people dressed in chic French garb, And it was really quite an experience of being together and feeling that oneness for just a few moments, and all the racial and political and religious conflicts sort of disappeared.
Absolutely. So the third section that I'm going to dive into, because I want to leave the rest to readers, but you mentioned for sparking the mind in that chapter that the sixth sense is intellect. Tell me about that discovery.
Well, I think that the intellect is so much more a part of, I'm almost going to say, popular culture in France. There are bookstores on every corner. There are readings all over the place. If you see someone just sitting, waiting for the metro, they're going to be reading. They're going to be reading a book, actually a physical book, or they're going to be reading on their various devices. And I'm not saying that Americans don't read, but I think they don't read as visibly. For example, you see ads all over the place, not just for products, as in product placement, but also for books, for the latest books that have come out. And you run into somebody and they say, "Oh, have you seen this thing came out?" And there are several shows on television that really privilege writing and talking about writing and talking about ideas. So I think I think the intellect is just so much more present in daily life. It's not that it doesn't exist in the United States, but I think it's more spread out in France, and there are more people who engage in it.
Absolutely. So the other chapters are art, defining Frenchness, taking time, making time. Now, the taking time, making time, I'll skip the other two, but that's something I found quite challenging living in America.
Mm-hmm.
And America is a very busy place. When my mom comes to visit, it is overwhelming for her as well. When do people slow down? When are they not working? Why is your husband always working? It's a different life. But the French have managed to, slow down, and they take time and they make time. Tell me about the differences with, obviously, French society and American society.
Well, I think that back to the idea of eating and celebrating the senses, there's a little bit of that. There's got to be time for the physical body somehow, and I love the idea that people are worth time. So I think often in this country we'll schedule a dinner or a quick lunch or a coffee or something, and you are looking at your watch because you have another meeting. So you haven't really carved out that much time for friendship. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. Of course it happens. But in France, it seems that that's a real priority. And in that chapter of the book, I believe it's in that chapter where I talk about there's actually a French law that you're not supposed to eat lunch at your desk or at your workplace if you so there's either a break room or a cafeteria, or you just get the time off and you go out to a cafe. Because the idea is you need to take time away from whatever it is that you're beating your head against the wall about. And they said that law was abrogated. It was sort of suspended during the pandemic. I don't know whether it's been reinstated or not. But because people found in the pandemic, obviously, they had to eat at their desks sometimes because a lot of things were closed. But I loved the idea that it's in French law that you're supposed to take a certain amount of vacation. French people, when they're hired by a company, they get a minimum of 5 weeks of paid vacation, and that goes for the very lowest person on the totem pole to the CEO. And then the CEO and people with seniority, they get up to, I believe it's 10 or 12 weeks. Mm-hmm. So it's really a society that even writes the idea that you should take time to enjoy into their laws.
Absolutely. That is uniquely French and to some degree European as well. So
yes.
Yes, they do take that time. But I'm curious though, Cathy, tell me about your inspiration to organize and put together this book, The French Art of Living Well. Tell me about your early idea phase and just, the spark that lit the fire for this book.
Well, I've always loved French culture, and obviously because I teach about it, I love sharing it with other people. But the way this book came about was that I taught a class at Carleton College where I teach called Joie de Vivre, La Joie de Vivre. And it was a sort of literature culture class in which we read different works by such people as Baudelaire and many other French writers, Rousseau, about different aspects of the joy of living. And an editor from St. Martin's Press was visiting Carleton with his daughter. She was a prospective student, and he contacted me and he said, how would you like to submit a proposal for a trade book on this very subject? And I first thought, I don't know if I do trade books. I haven't done that before, but it sounds wonderful. And about that time, my mother's retirement community asked me to give a lecture on Notre Dame, because Notre Dame had just burned. Mm-hmm. And I had so much fun writing that lecture for the most general, intelligent, but not necessarily an audience that knew about France. And so when I did that, I thought, yes, I am called to do this. So I contacted him and said I would love to try. So when I submitted the proposal, they accepted it.
Yay! Well, I'm super excited it's here. I hope readers will give it a go. Again, it's The French Art of Living Well. So, Cathy, I want to shake things up on the podcast really quick and play a game because to some degree, I feel this book feels very much like a travelogue. So we're going to play a game and it's called What to Do in France. So I'm going to ask you some situational questions and you'll share with me what you recommend. Are you ready?
Surely.
Yay. All right. So tell me your 3 top cities or towns to visit in France.
Well, obviously I would have a zillion, but I guess let's not even count Paris because everybody's going to go to Paris and I've lived there for about 10 years of my life and I love it. But I am forcing myself to get out of Paris next year when I'm on sabbatical and I'm going to go to Montpellier. And I can't tell you what to do there yet because I've only just briefly gone through it. So that is one of the places I don't know. But some of the places that I do know, well, in Paris, I guess I should say a few really brief things about what you can't miss when you go to Paris. You can't miss the Musée Rodin. So Rodin's museum, the great French sculptor, because it has outside gardens and you can be inside and outside, and it's in an old, very large house, I guess, mansion with wooden creaking floors. And the sculptures in there, some of the sculptures of Camille Claudel are just amazing. So don't miss the Musée Rodin. Do you want more things from Paris or shall I go to some other towns?
Oh, just your choice. If you want to stay in Paris, stay in Paris. If you want to recommend somewhere else, that's fine.
The thing I would recommend to do in all of France is just walk, walk, walk. Because everywhere in France, you can just see things when you're walking. I love that. Even in the villages, a village I stayed in for a summer is called Souillac, and it's in the south of France between Brive and Cahors, right on the border of Dordogne. And some of those villages in Dordogne and in Le Lot are quite lovely. A famous Renaissance writer named Etienne de la Boétie, who wrote Against Tyranny, was born in Sarlat, and that's a lovely little village in the south of France. So I recommend villages as well as big cities like Paris and Montpellier, and of course Lyon, which has done a whole lot of revamping of its center, and it's quite a beautiful city.
Amazing. What are the 3 things you'd recommend someone order off the menu?
Well, my favorite for main course, I would recommend saumon à l'oseille, so salmon with sorrel sauce. It's a French classic if you like salmon. Let's see, do I get... If I get a dessert, I would get a tarte au citron or a lemon tart because those are usually fabulous in France. And, oh my goodness, I guess I would, on a nice chilly winter day, I would order some version of ratatouille from southern France with Provence spices in it.
Yay. All right. Now, when I think of France, especially Paris, I think of shopping. So 3 tips for shopping in France.
Well, I would say Boutiques, certainly. There are these little finds, even around the Latin Quarter where there are students, quite a few students. There are some reasonable little shops, and I love discovering things in there. It's really fun, though, also to go to something like Bon Marché or Printemps, these big department stores, just to see what they're like. And they've redone La Samaritaine. Now it's really way out of most of our price ranges because it's luxury goods, but it's really fun to go inside and just see them. But I guess for clothes, the Latin Quarter, and also there are places in the north of Paris where you can find some good deals as well.
Amazing. 3 places for relaxing and exploring.
Well, we're back to the Paris milieu, and I guess the garden that I know the best, where I've really lived near it several times, is the Jardin du Luxembourg, which is right in the center of Paris. But also, you can't help but love something like going to cemeteries, like Montparnasse Cemetery or Père Lachaise Cemetery. A lot of French people just walk around those, and I'm one of those people who love old tombs and sort of quiet places. Another place to relax, I think, is just in cafes. I love sitting in outdoor cafes all over Paris. Probably the coolest street right now for that is the Rue de Montorgueil, which is in the second arrondissement, not very far from Châtelet, so not very far from the center of Paris.
Yay, amazing. Well, thank you so much for playing and giving us some great recommendations. Thank you.
My pleasure.
All right, let's get into your writing life. How long did it take for you to pull together The French Art of Living Well?
Well, I do have a day gig, so but by teaching and doing research during the day, I guess it took me maybe 2.5 years.
Okay. And what would you say is the most difficult part of your creative process?
Probably organization. I don't have any problem with ideas, but they all sort of come to me, and I get very excited about them and start writing. But as my editor first said when I sent in a first draft, he said, wait a minute, this one chapter is 6 pages and this next chapter is 30 pages. And you have to figure out a way to make it a little more standardized, because I think I'm not very standardized in my way of work.
Oh, gotcha. And now that you have this book out there, and I know you've co-authored many other things, but if you could look back and tell your younger self anything, your younger writing self, what would you tell her?
Start this kind of writing earlier. It's really a blast.
Amazing. Well, I'm glad you're loving it. So we're here to talk about your book, The French Art of Living Well, but we want to know what you're reading as well. So if you don't mind, share with our listeners the last book or books that you finished reading that you'd now recommend.
Well, a couple of things. One is I have recently read some books that I embarrassedly had never read in my life, like Virginia Woolf's Mrs. Dalloway and like Tolstoy's Anna Karenina. Don't tell anyone that I hadn't read that, but it's really worth reading later. I like reading fiction, nonfiction, and poetry. And I like some of the nonfiction that I've read pretty recently that helps me a little bit understand the world is something like Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow and Isabel Wilkerson's Caste. But slightly more recent books, Sarah Bakewell, who's a British writer. She's not I don't know if she spends her life as a scholar, but she wrote a book called How to Live a Life of Montaigne, and that was really fantastic. And for fun, I've been reading Epicurean kind of books like Dara Moskovitz, Grumdahl's Drink This, Wine Made Simple. So it's a book about wine for people who don't know about wine, because I've taken some wine tasting and enology classes too, and I thought it'd be fun to teach that someday. So I'm learning from her too, because I want to get certified in that next year in Paris. And then for real fun, David Leibowitz's humorous books on France, like The Sweet Life in Paris, and he includes recipes and anecdotes, and he's a real stitch.
Yep, absolutely. What would you say is your favorite childhood book?
Well, like every other girl, probably of my generation, I liked Nancy Drew because she was a spunky girl who figured things out. But my other favorite was this rather maudlin but very sweet book called Where the Red Fern Grows. Do you know that one?
No.
And it was written by a guy named Wilson Rawls, and it's a sort of children's Ted Lasso in the sense that it's warm-hearted, but it's sadder. It's about a boy in the Ozarks who has a couple of hunting dogs named Little Ann and Old Dan. And anyway, it's just a lovely children's book. And when I was small, that was my first introduction to real writers, to imagine that they were actually alive and actually real people. So I was 10 years old and I wrote him a letter and he wrote back. And that was like the beginning of my love of wanting to get to meet authors.
Right. That's amazing. Do you have any books that you're looking forward to getting to and reading in the year ahead?
Absolutely. I like poetry. And so I'd really love to read an earlier collection by a woman named Tracy Smith. She was the Tracy K. Smith. She was the former poet laureate of the U.S. And I have read her collection called Such Color, which is recent. It's from 2021. But I want to read her collection Wade in the Water, which is named after a spiritual. And then for nonfiction, I'd love to read Matthew Desmond's Poverty by America, which tells us a lot about this country. And then finally, there's a new French book out. It's not that new. It won the Goncourt Prize in France in 2021. Are you familiar with the Goncourt Prize?
Yes.
Yes, because for your readers who maybe haven't heard of it, it's like the Nobel Prize, but for literature within France. And it's a Senegalese guy called Mohamed Mbougar Sarr. And his book is called, I've actually started it, but it's very long and I had to give it up during the semester because I got too busy. But it's called The Most Secret Memory of Men. And it's a really interesting sort of fictional take on an African writer who really did exist and who was kind of banned from the literary and actually social community because they said that he plagiarized, but what he was doing was playing with different authors. So anyway, that's one that I want to read too.
Ooh, how interesting. I think that one's coming to America later this year.
I think so. Yeah, I've seen that it's out. It might even be out now, but I'm dying to get back to it.
Ooh, amazing. So in addition to loving our authors and books and getting recommendations, we love our bookstores. So share with our listeners a local favorite, childhood favorite, or just an indie bookstore you discovered on your travels.
Well, I can throw out just a few. In Northfield, Minnesota, there's a bookstore called Content. Mm-hmm. Or Content. You can pronounce it however you want. And Northfield is a small town of only about 20,000 people, but it has 2 colleges. It's just outside of the Twin Cities. And Content has done wonderful things for the town. It has readings and so on. In Minneapolis, Majors and Quinn is a wonderful independent bookstore. And in France, the tiniest of all possible bookstores. It's a postage stamp size bookstore that I just love. It's near Montparnasse, and it's called the Librairie d'Odessa. Odessa, it's on the road, Odessa Road. So those are 3 of my faves.
Yay, thanks for sharing. So, kind of wrapping things up together though, Cathy, I know you've done your job, you've written the book, it's here, readers can get their hands on a copy, but what are you hoping readers might feel or think or learn or just take away after they've turned the last page of The French Art of Living Well?
Well, there are sort of romantic parts to it, right? I mean, in the sense of what a friend of mine calls baguette polishing. I hope I'm not doing that. That's one of the stereotypes of France, of the sort of baguettes and cheese and checkered tablecloths and berets and bicycles and perfumes and parasols. But the other stereotype of French people is the sort of existentialist, brooding pessimists who are mean to tourists. And I hope to get beyond both of those stereotypes and just show some of the lessons that at least I think I might have gleaned from the French culture about living well, about la joie de vivre, about taking time and making time. And I would hope that readers might find something in it that they could also take for their own lives.
Absolutely. Well, Cathy, thank you so much for coming on the show and speaking with me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Victoria.
Thank you so much for listening to the Reader's Couch podcast. Please subscribe to the show, share it with a friend, and take a few seconds to leave a rating and review. Until next time, stay lounging, stay reading, and whenever you're in doubt, go straight to your local bookstore or library. Thanks again for listening, and happy reading.